Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you very much for joining the Leaders Live webinar today. I am personally really excited about this session. I think we're going to have a really good debate and discussion. Today, we're talking all about how to elevate women in automotive and engineering and that sort of traditional male-dominated sphere of industry. So we've got an amazing panel of leaders, both men and women, to talk about how we can do more to elevate women, not just in terms of getting women into those types of industry, but also once they're there, how do we keep them and how do we help move them into those leadership positions going forward? So in terms of Leaders Live, if you haven't joined us before, we have a bit of a format. We do like to get our audience involved. We always like to say these aren't just your average webinars. We do like to get lots of audience participation. So please do feel free to give your comments, ask questions on the chat. We will be doing a Q&A towards the end of the session. We're also going to be doing a bit of voting today. So we like to kind of ask you your opinion and your views on things. All of those are anonymous, so you can vote, and we'll be sharing that information with you on the screen very shortly. But to kick off, really, what I want to do is just ask our panel to briefly introduce themselves. So 30 seconds, guys, if we could start maybe with you, Helen, to introduce yourself, and we'll just go around the room and then we'll kick off.
Thanks, Helen. Good afternoon, everybody. Helen Foord. I head up government relations for Groupe PSA in the UK. So that's government relations and public policy. So managing the relationship between the business and government. Obviously, we have the Peugeot, Citroën, DS, and Vauxhall brands in the UK and our 2 manufacturing sites. I have been in the automotive industry for about 10 years now. And before that, I worked for the energy regulator for 10 years as well. So I went from one male-dominated industry to another.
Excellent. Well, thank you, Helen. And Eman, how about yourself?
So I'm exactly the same positions as Helen. I'm responsible for political affairs and government relations within Bosch Group for the UK and Ireland. I'm an engineer myself and working in this industry now for more than 10 years. Was in the healthcare before, but dominated absolutely with the automotive sector.
Fantastic, thanks, Eman. And obviously, for purposes of balance, because this is what our discussion is all about, Jim, would you like to introduce yourself and welcome?
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me as well, Helen. My name is Jim Holder. I am the editorial director of Haymarket Automotive. So that's what car, Autocar, classic and sports car, and car and accessory trader. So I guess into online terms, that's around 6 million users every single month, mostly about to buy cars or who love cars.
Thanks so much, Jim. And Konstanze, would you like to introduce yourself?
Absolutely. Hello, everybody. My name is Konstanze Scharring. I'm the Director of Policy and Government Affairs at the SMMT, the Society of Motor Manufacturers and Traders. So my job is really working with these wonderful colleagues that have already introduced themselves and many more, and a great department at the leading trade body, the SMMT, to manage our relations with government. So delighted to be here.
Thanks, Konstanze. And lastly, Fatima, would you like to introduce yourself, please?
Yeah, thank you. Hi, everyone. My name is Fatima Semnani, and I am the CTIO for ventures within BT Enterprise. I'm afraid I don't work in the automotive industries, but I work in the technology. So I'm responsible for the new technology which is coming around us, like 5G, IoT, and drones. I'm trained as a chemical engineer. I used to work for a university, so I have a background in that area, and it would be great to bring my perspective to this group.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, everyone. It is brilliant to have you on this session today. So look, I'm just gonna put it out there straight off. What on earth made you join the types of industries that you have? Because let's be honest, they're not easy. And all of you in many ways have had to trailblaze your way through this. So I think for the purposes of our viewers as well today, could you just give a little bit of insight about what your motivation was, why you joined the industry that you have? And Helen, again, let's just start with you, and then I promise I'll stop picking on you first.
Thank you. In all honesty, I think I chose the role, first of all, before I chose the industry. But now I'm in the industry. It's challenging, it's dynamic, it's evolving. There are in what I do, I always say, you know, we do kind of love a drama in government relations, and there are plenty of them around. So it certainly keeps me on my toes. It certainly helps from I know the things that I enjoy from a crisis communication point of view. And those things are 10 a penny in the automotive industry at the minute. So I think that that's very much what keeps me in the industry, despite the challenges that I'm sure we're going to discuss today. It's about that network, the diversity. You know, yesterday, you know, the announcement about 2030, you know, we have Brexit, we are in COVID, these are all unprecedented times. I think that when you're in the industry, how we actually work together and what we do in government relations, I think it is really empowering. I really enjoy that part of it as well. And I know that's very unique for the particular role that we do. But again, you know, these are the things and these are the reasons why I think I do stay. It's the ability to change this massive industry that pulls at everybody's heartstrings. And very much in my role, being able to work with great people, work with government to ensure that, you know, the industry can have that platform and we can grow and we can face these challenges on all of our businesses, and what we can do, we can grow and adapt and be the leaders that we want to be.
Great, thank you, Helen. I can see, Konstanze, you're nodding. I guess that what Helen's saying strikes a chord with you as well. What was your motivation?
No, absolutely, it does, Helen. You know, so I've been now 20 years in the industry, and it is a very similar route, you know, because from my background, I'm really driven and interested in politics, and in particular in European politics. And around the time when I came to London, that was actually something that was in demand, dare I say it, and something where I could try and find to look for jobs. So the first motivation is really I like working on the fringes of politics. Secondly, very much around that I personally like working for a trade association. It's a privileged position to be in, to work with all these businesses and have also the responsibility of being like a mediator between industry and government. And I thoroughly enjoy this as a challenge and as a devotion by now. And then I think last but not least, automotive was very much in that space. You know, I did look around a lot. There are lots of interesting industries there, but nothing can really match, as Helen says, automotive for the diversity of issues that if you like that sort of thing, it really appeals to you to have to deal on one level with climate change issues, on another level with skills issues and manufacturing and consumer affairs. So it's a highly diverse environment, and I find that extremely rewarding and continuously challenging, which is the attraction, really.
Yeah, and I think that point you say about it being quite highly diverse, I think a lot of people perhaps who aren't aware so much of the engineering and automotive industry won't have even fathomed the fact that you might do a role in government relations, for example. You know, it is a huge industry, and there's so much variety within the industry that I think people automatically think that they must be an engineer or they must be working on the shop floor to make a car, and actually that's not the case at all. Eman, you've got a slightly different background. I know you're working in government affairs now, but tell us a little bit about how you got into the industry.
So I wish to tell you that I chosen to be in this industry, but actually I was born in Qatar in a very liberal family, and had the chance to study in Germany, and actually came to study medicine in Germany. And when I discovered this is more than 10 years in the family circumstances, I had to change to engineering. But, you know, I was originally nerdy. So that's why the STEMs and mathematics was actually, you know, very interesting for me. And I have to say, I never regret and I never looked back. You know, the problem is if we close all our eyes and we have the image of engineer, you will think it's someone who is a plumber or is solving probably a problem in a tractor. But actually the engineering is like Helen and Konstanze said, is wider than that. It's about, you know, solving problems for the climate change. Environment is also the connectivity, the 5G, the drones, and IT. All of these interesting things is encompasses of engineering. And the automotive sector has, you know, it starts from the component. You know, I work for a tier 1 supplier, and if you could imagine that in one car you have more than 1,500 components, and all they have to synchronize like a music instrument to then drive, and that is itself actually is fascinating. And I think this fascination, it brings the industry together, and diversity could be better, definitely. I mean, you speak to the leaders, the female leaders in the industry here in the group. If I, definitely Konstanze and Helen and Fatima, but we need more for sure. And I think the image needs just to change.
Yeah. And on that point about image, Jim, I guess you've had quite a good perspective. In your role, you've worked across, you know a lot of these manufacturers, these OEMs, the wider supply chain, and just looking at it from I guess like a publishing point of view, do you think that the industry does have a bit of a image problem?
Yeah, I think probably, think about what I say before I say it, but I think probably more of an image problem than an actual problem in some regards, in that, there is still that image of Arthur Daly. There is still an image of sort of a slightly old school industry that doesn't necessarily have its foot on looking forwards, which is ironic given the reality that's just been described by your other speakers. This is an industry where there is no status quo. There is no day that is the same, and at its most extreme, in motorsport where I started, there are challenges and changes every single day, and at the other end of the scale, in these massive operations that are facing absolutely seismic change, that puts them on the front page agenda of the media. So I do think there is an image problem, and I do think that part of the challenge, and a significant part of the challenge, is getting the people who can change that image out there and in front of people, just to recognise what is possible.
Yeah. Fatima, from your opinion, with, I guess that tech side and the technology side that you're perhaps more involved in, how does it compare, do you think, to what the other guests have sort of described about their industry in terms of not just in terms of getting involved, but also that perhaps image problem?
I think there is some similarity there, definitely. I think going back on when I joined the industry 18 years ago, I really was excited about the technology itself. And as a person, when I was younger, I loved science and I loved the innovation behind it. So I wasn't thinking that, my goodness, there is all of these, process problem, image problem. How do you get to the top? Have you seen someone like me? Have I had a role model so I can get there and I can get to that objective I have in my head? So I think we have all similar problems or similar image problem. Whether with automotive and technology, and because the toys that technology bring in is seen as a male thing. When you look at the technology, perspective, you can see Facebook, you can see Microsoft, you can see Apple. So who is at the top of that? Who's the innovative person? Who is, getting all these cool, devices into our world? And they are mainly, male, isn't it? So there is an image there, but behind the scene, there are lots of women who are doing a lot of work in the labs. And I think we are, with coronavirus, you can see in all of this biochemistry and microbiology labs, you see a lot of women scientists doing all of this work, which are quite valuable to our society. And I think, one good thing which is coming to the front is, we as human and as society, we are men and women. And the jobs we do and the industry we lead should reflect our industry. And I think that's what we aim to do, really.
Yeah, thank you, Fatima. We're going to just try and see if we can put one of the polling questions on, and we'll leave it up there for a few minutes just for people to engage and get involved with, if we can. Just to continue on that discussion, I think your point, Fatima, about the role models is interesting. And you mentioned at the start when you were speaking that when you went into the industry, it wasn't really in the forefront of your mind to think, how do I get to the top? What kind of barriers may I face? I guess when you start an industry, maybe you don't sort of think about those things. But in terms of all of your experiences, let's be honest, have you encountered barriers within the industry? What types of barriers have you faced? Are you able to give any examples, or perhaps that you've witnessed or seen? Obviously, these are difficult subjects, but it would be good to kind of get your thoughts in terms of what you think those barriers still are, and perhaps what they have been in the past. Constanze, let's start with you on that. You've been in the industry 20 years, and I know at the SMMT for a long time. But have you sort of witnessed perhaps a positive change even in terms of some of the barriers that have existed?
I think absolutely. I think the first thing to say, however, I think about the SMMT compared to the wider industries. Look, we are London-based. We are the equivalent of an SME, if you want to. We are a service provider. And I think the SMMT has already been significantly diverse and open to this, which was one of the attractions for me when I came. I could have faced all sorts of barriers for going there. And in the end, sometimes you face your own barriers in what your own aspirations are. So I've been very, very lucky. I think, however, the typical things that are happening and where we've got so much better since I started off is indeed to try and recognize through the diversity and inclusion agenda, really, that people are diverse. We need all the talents that we have. And that means they come with everything that comes with it. You need to think about people holistically through their whole life, and their needs change at different points. So the barriers are different from wherever you are. And when you have 20 years experience, you know that, because you remember the kind of barriers that might there be at the beginning, and the barriers that might come later when, like me, you have children and you want to, recognize and reconcile the demands of being a mother and having a family with the demands of a very demanding job. And I think we've gone so much better. The flexibilities are there, but there's much more we can do. And I'm sure we'll discuss that in a minute.
Yeah. Helen, just perhaps taking on from Constanze's point, obviously you've had two quite interesting careers, both in quite heavily male-dominated sectors. Have you seen a kind of a change, and what are the barriers that you perhaps would be able to describe that you've seen in the past?
Yeah, I think that I've certainly learned from both of my careers and had role models in both of the roles that I had. And if I look back, I think working actually for the government, surprisingly, government bodies and Ofgem as it was at the time, I think was diverse. I don't think I noticed government necessarily, not having diversity. I think it was very much the industry, when you met people, then often being aware that one of the very few females in the room at that time. And I think very much in automotive, again, the same. You don't really think about it until you sit there, and if you're looking around the table, you realise that quite often you are the one, or there's less than 10% females in the room. I think absolutely as an industry we're addressing this. I think all companies have policies in place. We do at Groupe PSA and at Vauxhall, groups together, how we can change, how we can break down those cultural things. But I also think they're also wider society and about different people's roles as well, and what a mother and a female role is compared to a male. And I think that we're certainly getting better there, having that discussion, being open about it. I know that when I had children, it wasn't necessarily having children. It was then the balance of when you have them and you want to go back to work. That's the challenge. It's kind of like, I feel with COVID and with the situation that we're all unfortunately found ourselves in, one of the good things is remote working and working from home. Working from home has become acceptable. It has become a norm. No longer do we have people go, well, they're working from home, i.e. it's a way that they're dodging doing something. There's a real recognition here from business and from employers that people are working from home, and actually they're far more productive. And as a working mother, for me, I find that's a real leveler. I think that's a great step forward, and something that I think as an industry we need to keep that going forward. This shouldn't just end because social distancing has come to an end, hopefully at one point soon. We should recognise the benefits that they can actually give. It's not perfect for everybody. I absolutely understand that. But actually that flexible working and getting that work-life balance is really important for everybody.
I think that's a great point, Helen. And I think certainly the past few months, despite the difficulties, that flexible working has been a massive leveler, as you say. And, even to the point where, I'm sure you may have had it, and I'm sure some of our viewers watching, my son has certainly been on several of my Zoom calls and waved hello. He's not here today because he's at school, thankfully. But, we've all experienced that. And actually a year or so ago, we probably all would have been quite horrified by that prospect. But now it's become socially acceptable in a very short space of time, for men and for women, actually, because we've all been at home looking after our families. Fatima, from your perspective with technology as well, do you think that have you seen that barriers have been broken down? Obviously, tech is a massively growing industry. It's extremely diverse in terms of its rapidity, in terms of development of technology and fast-paced, etc. Is that in any way kind of helping to also accelerate breaking down barriers, do you think?
I think definitely it is. And I think technology will be an enabler in breaking those barriers. And we definitely can see that we have come a long way from when I started 18 years ago. So we weren't talking about diversity, we were talking about technology mainly, working hard, being resilient, doing everything that you can to deliver your objectives, to make sure that you are successful. However, I think we had great women leaders in technology and specifically in BT, and they really set the pace into women who go and have children and making sure that when they come back, they have a job that excites them, that they are able to thrive again, even though they have children. And that has been recognized. So we have done a lot of work where I am at the moment, but there is more to do. Definitely much, much more to do. Because if you look in terms of equality, and if you see what the World Economic saying, we're not going to achieve that. I think there were a talk about 100 years or 150 years, which sounds ridiculous, really. So that's why we started talking about equity, so equity. So how do we start the race to be equal? So if we have two people doing the same race and starting from a different place, that's not equal. So there should be processes and tools, and making sure that we bring women or people from diverse background to the level where they're able to compete and have that confidence in themselves, to put their hands up and get to those programs and that visibility where you are able to show off your USP and be able to deliver to the technology world or to society or whatever that we believe in. And I think that sense of belonging and sense to be yourself, that's what we should be aiming at, that we don't need to be anybody else, because ourselves is really important, and being genuinely at work and feeling comfortable, that in a way you don't want to feel to be anywhere else. And that's how we will be able to achieve that balance. And that's what we will be looking at. And I think the conversation now is very open, it's absolutely open.
Yeah, thank you, Fatima. We'll just pop another polling up in a second as well for you guys to also take part in. But some of the points you were just mentioning there, Fatima, I think are interesting. And Eman, I'm going to pick on you because you've got a really fascinating backstory, having come from Qatar, moved to Germany, I think, and pursued a career in engineering, and then moved, I think, to different parts of the world. That's a big leap for someone to make, and particularly in what is a very still traditionally, male-dominated environment of engineering. Just for people watching or perhaps thinking of going into that type of career, what advice would you give them? What are the things that I guess need to build your own personal resilience to push through in what could be quite difficult times?
Absolutely. I was really fortunate that the engineering teams I was integrated into, they were very helpful. And engineers usually, most of them introverts, and they like to work in their projects. Sometimes, as a woman, we think differently. So I wouldn't say it was a barrier, but it was really interesting to see, for example, when we were working in a project, to see how different we think. So you will see that women usually see things more in a connected way, and we connect things diverse. Where men, they focus on a certain element and then execute the solution. So it was really, at the end, from the experience perspective, for me and also for my colleagues, good experience, because we think differently, and also that some people, they see that's challenge, but it's actually an opportunity that we have different cultural background, which brings really a diverse solutions start to the engineering problem solving. Generally speaking, I have barriers, absolutely. Sometimes I felt I didn't fit in because I'm different. So you really need to be confident, and you really need to speak loudly, not in a louder form, but in a way that people will hear you. And it was always a flourishing for me, actually, and encouraging to see other role models. So I have to say, when I started at to be political affairs and government relation in the UK, there was a doubt if I can manage because I'm not British. And I saw Konstanze. And Konstanze was the first person I saw at the SMMT as a female leader. And I never told her this, but she was my role model. And then, afterwards I saw Helen and others. So it is encouragement to see other women with the different situations in their lives, and really have this exchange which is, even with the whole respect with my male colleagues, and I do love them, but it is really different when you interact with the female conversation. The whole dynamic is different, and also the whole logic is also different. So I would always recommend, try to have a role model, and if you can, a mentor.
That's great, Eman. Thank you. Konstanze, what do you say to that? This is a Leaders Live first. You're her role model. Was her role model?
Well, I'm speechless, but obviously I think Eman and we will continue to hopefully inspire many after us. I think we are very, very lucky in the government affairs field that there is a really good network of females around that are able to work with each other, but also happy to network going forward. So certainly, if you like government, if you like politics, and you're female, that's definitely a very, very good place to be. But I would say, like you discussed earlier on, I do think it's important. I wouldn't be where I was without people helping on the way. I definitely think what Eman was saying, find a mentor or create more role models. But at the same time, I think the males and especially the leaders in our industry, they have a role to play, no doubt, because the figures speak for themselves. There's still too few female leaders, that we need more. So male leaders, and I think the fantastic news is they will and they want to, and that's the change that I definitely see. Certainly within the SMMT, we have full endorsement for diversity, inclusion, really taking this on board now, and I really hope this comes to fruition, because it does need that shift. It cannot be left just to the individual, to me giving good advice to the next female colleague as to trust in yourself, all the things you want, work smart, network, have a good support network would definitely be one of those. Because I think what we sometimes focus quite rightly on is, what do we need? What flexibilities do I need because of childcare arrangements? But what I'd rather have is actually that we find the right arrangements for both men and women, that I don't even have to worry about asking for it, because, my other half might actually have a much more flexible arrangement, and that will free me up to not even worry about it, and it not becoming a female issue, but it's actually, shared across both sides. So that's for me really the ultimate goal, where I would like to go. But, we need to start somewhere.
Yeah, absolutely. Jim, just picking up on that point about role models that we were talking about. You've been involved quite a lot with the top 100 women in automotive for several years now. Talk a little bit about what that is and why you felt it was necessary to set up, and how that is perhaps starting to put a spotlight on some of these women in roles like automotive?
Sure. So we set it up 5 years ago with Autocar. And the goal has always been twofold. One, to celebrate the top 100 women and celebrate their individual achievements, but also to use, if I can use that word, their success as a way of highlighting the opportunities that are available within the industry. And what we've seen is that it's gathered momentum. In the first year, if I'm brutally honest, we struggled to find 100 women who would fit the categories that we had and build out a top 100. We asked for nominations, and if I'm brutally honest, some car companies didn't even want to put women forward. We had one famous quote back from one company that they wouldn't put any women forward because they were scared they would be poached as a result of them having any profile. Now, I'm pleased to say 5 years on, that really has been swept away. We now have the incredibly hard challenge of trying to whittle down a list that is many times greater than 100 nominees down to 100. And I think what we're starting to learn is actually even women who were skeptical about a top 100 list as a means of promoting the industry are starting to see some of the benefits. And I think what has been said is entirely true, but I think at certain stages of your career, you might think you've got it, you're in hand, you can handle it. But I think what we're starting to see 5 years in is that women who didn't necessarily need the help at the start are now starting to see the benefits of not only being promoted themselves, but also building a network of people who have faced the same challenges as, that they have had, who are able to talk about them from experience. And also, as has been said, being role models, being the change that you want to see. Some of the best speakers we've had have been there, they've done it, and they talk from a position of authority. And I do think it's really important that people can see what's possible. And I think as we talk today, I know it's not directly relevant to engineering, but it's certainly directly relevant to automotive. That the boss of Foord of Britain is Lisa Brankin, a woman. The boss of the PSA Group is Alison Jones. Both of them are incredible role models for automotive. They aren't in their roles because they're women; they're in their roles because they're amazing. But I think they absolutely, we should recognise and they should recognise the good they can do in those roles. They are running the leading automotive groups in Britain brilliantly. So absolutely, I think what we're doing needs to continue. I don't think it's by any means solved. And I also think there's a new generation of starters that needs to be encouraged to stay in the industry and move up within it, which is another strand to what we do with Autocar. But absolutely, just in 5 years, there has been a significant change in attitudes and achievement.
Absolutely. I mean, I've certainly seen that increase for sure, I think. We're just going to do another quick poll, but I think this is pertinent to what you've just been saying, Jim, really. So for people that are watching on the live stream, what is the most important aspect of attracting and retaining women in the engineering and automotive industry? So what is the key thing that we need to be doing so that we bring women into this industry, but also importantly, we keep them? Just to ask, I guess, the panel as well, what you think about that question. Helen, in terms of attracting women, where does it begin? Does it start at school? Should we be doing this at home with our young daughters? What should we be doing to help young women see this as a future career?
As a mother of two boys, I also feel I have a responsibility, but it's all about equality, isn't it?
It
and
is.
So it's about teaching all kids at all levels that the world is your oyster. It's about treating people how you want to be treated in it, and it's about working towards your goals, and using people and supporting people to get there in the right place. I think what Jim does and what Autocar with the top 100 women is really, it's shining a light, isn't it, on those successful females in the industry. And none of us want to be recognised just because we're women. we want to be recognised because we're leaders in our roles, and that's very much what this is doing. And I think I'm guilty of this, but not very good about shouting about our successes as well. I think that we need to be teaching our children and helping our colleagues to be proud of our successes. And I think with Autocar and shining that light on it, it's really warming when the list come out, and they're fortunate enough to be in that list myself, and understand, the message that they get from different people throughout the organisation it really lifts your spirits. It really makes you feel part of the team, and it very much gives you a bit of responsibility to go, I have a role here to help other people as well. And certainly having that and as a leading female, I need to be proud of that and shout about that as well, and I'm very much aware of that, and help others around. I'm very lucky to have worked with some amazing people, both male and female, and be a mentor to a certain number of people as well. And that's something that I really take with pride, and it's a real responsibility. And I think that, certainly sharing light on that, talking about those successes is really important. And some of that we do with the Automotive Council, and I co-chair the Diversity and Inclusion Working Group with Lisa from Nissan, and Eman's on that group as well. Very much, we realise as an industry we're not very good about shouting about these things. And, I think, all of our boards will know fully well who their customer base is, and they know that our organisation needs to reflect that as well. And having those strong role models, those female leaders in there, is equally as important, but not as a quota there for your own skill, but in your own right. And that, I think, is really important.
Thanks, Helen. So we've just got a few results coming in from our polls. So what are the most effective things in terms of attracting and retaining women into this industry? So 37% of you think that eliminating gender bias, particularly in recruitment and promotion. So we've talked a little bit about this, I guess, haven't we, in terms of moving up the scale as you grow within the actual industry itself. Talking about, do you feel that you see gender bias still? Obviously our audience feel that that's still quite an issue. It's a hard question to answer, I appreciate. Fatima, from your perspective, do you think that there's something similar going on in your industry from the tech side?
Absolutely. I think the unconscious bias is here and well and living. And the way we are trying to address that is via training, and as well as reverse mentoring. So many of our leaders and executive members of the board are being reverse mentored by people from diverse background and women, so they can understand and to feel what it is like to be in their shoes and how the world looks, from their eyes. So I think that is a brilliant thing to do. So I remember when I've seen the reverse mentoring initiative started by EY, and it's been taken as well to schools, where one of the EY director was getting some of the parents or the male within the school of his children, to have a meeting and talk about reverse mentoring. And I guess that's how you start connecting the dots, isn't it, around you, and spread the word. It's not really anybody's fault, but it is the way our society has been set up centuries ago. Women at home, men go and work. So we need to change that, and it's not easy to change it. So it needs to have education behind it, openness to learning and understanding other people, and that's how we can achieve that leap change. into a place where hopefully we will not be discussing how to elevate women or how to elevate people from diverse background, but we will be thinking how to elevate our society together. So I think we have been coming a long way from when I joined, but there is more work to be done, and we cannot be, just leave it to its own devices. So we need to have tools and support and what do you call it? The passion to drive it, and it make it our mission that this is the right thing to do. Absolutely the right thing to do.
Thanks, Fatima. Let's talk a little bit about, I guess, once you're in the industries that you're in, one of the barriers can be moving up at the quickest rate that you want to. And of course, that's a challenge for everyone, man, woman. But I think for women, many of us get to a point where, we might choose to have a family or, for whatever reason. And sometimes that can almost create a natural break in terms of going back into a career and kind of moving up. It's certainly something I've personally experienced, and I'm sure other people watching this have too. Helen, you touched on it earlier about sort of, it's about getting back into work and kind of carrying on a very full career. What advice would you give to people watching who perhaps don't have children yet, or are sort of at the start of their career but are really desperate to kind of move up and move on? What advice would you give them to kind of help them at this point? Konstanze, how about you?
Oh, how about me? Well, I think it is something you absolutely quite rightly can have as a major barrier. I hope it doesn't put you off from starting your family, because it never should. But I think the challenge that you will, as I said, the challenge that you will have is you hopefully have an employer where there is plannable things for you, so it doesn't become a negotiation between you and the employer. I think this is why it is so important that some of these things are just structurally addressed through policies, through perceptions of flexibilities that people can count on and don't have to ask for. I think this is really, really important. And as I said, that should go in both directions, men and women. But I would still say the number one is, when I started my own family, it was quite clear for me that I couldn't do the job without flexibility by my employer, which was great. I got that, I got it. I took 1 year off because I really felt I needed that full time to try and settle myself, to get myself onto a good start. For me, that was the right choice. And others have other opportunities, but my employer was able to do this. And I've now got 2 wonderful children and can do my career. I think the other thing from my own experience that I've pursued was, obviously, I saw investment in childcare as an investment. It is unbelievably expensive in this country, as we all know. It's a real strain. I come from another country, so I didn't have a big network of support around me. And I think many people are in very similar situations. You don't have to come from another country to be in that situation. So I do think you need to really think about your career and this as an investment that you into your children to be able. You need to find the right balance between what you will want, and you need to be truthful to yourself, what you really want in your new role, not just as an employee, but as a mother. And then you need to find the right balance, but never regret. You will never regret it, making that investment.
Yeah, fully agree with that. Let's move on a little bit. Let's talk about pay. It's always a bit of a taboo subject, but we've got our next polling question. So do you think there is a gender pay gap in the automotive and engineering sectors? So we've just got that poll out now, so we'll give people a chance to respond. But just getting some thoughts from our panel. Eman, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I said yes, and I said yes because of the current published stats from the industry that you could see that there is still a gender pay gap. Now it is, the industry is really trying to change that. I think there are 3 reasons probably for this issue. One is that there is not many really women within these industry sectors available, and probably of some of the positions you will find a dominated male already existence there. And probably is historically driven that then the pay gap started to initiate between the genders. There is no excuse for that, but this is only maybe one reason for that. The second one is that indeed when you start a career together, and we touched on this, the women usually probably maybe they will stop for one, or like in Germany, you're allowed to have maternity leave for 3 years. And your career stopped, unfortunately. And then when you come back to where you started, and your colleagues already actually moved on within their experience and payment and etc. And that also reflects on this as well. The third one is, and I wouldn't mention which employer that was, but when it was stigmatized, and they said you cannot compare pears with apples, because probably the experiences are different. So even if you are in the same position, the other person maybe have a different experience than you, and that's why you have the pay gap. It's not an excuse again, but as I said, I think that through publishing these results now, the companies are really encouraged to look how they can solve the problem, and how can they, if you like, try to have more of a fairer system and better results moving on. So I think it was clever, definitely, to publish the results and be obliged to publish the results, to also be held accountable for it.
Thanks, Helen. Eman, have you seen, Helen, have you seen any difference in terms of, since the report on gender pay has been published, have you seen any difference? And what are your thoughts on it in general in terms of pay?
I think as a whole, the UK, we have an issue with females in the automotive industry. We know from the work we do in Auto Council, if you benchmark the UK against other European countries, we don't do well at all. And then if you're looking at the gender pay gap information, it's about understanding, like Eman was saying, it's the gaps, it's where are the gaps. And I know our own company very much published even more data, because we're keen to understand where the gaps are. Is there a gap in this progression? And I think that you see that in lower level jobs there is more of a gender mix, and then that dies away as you go into middle management, and then it comes back a little bit. But then if you go to like the C-suite jobs, that's kind of like there's a massive gap there as well. So I think that, again, it's about shining light on the issue. It means we're all talking about it. Businesses are very much aware of it, very much aware of when that data is published and where their company sits. And I think that the government in publishing that information, we all know it's a very crude analysis. It's not telling that true picture, but we really need to unpick and understand that picture and where we can make a difference. And that's what we're trying to do with the Auto Council. Is as an industry, look where we think the challenges are. We know what the problem statements are. We know that there's an issue in retaining women in automotive. That goes without saying. We know that there's an underrepresentation of not just gender, but it's about the whole D&I argument as well, discussion as well. And I think it's recognised. It's as Konstanze said, it's the policies. It's looking beneath. It's pulling away everything and making sure that from that outset that there is no taking away that gender bias as well at the recruitment stage. I can't remember where it was, but I did read a study recently about a company that had completely taken gender out of all of their recruitment processes, and the change that they had, and also taken it away from experience base as well. It's about your skill set, not necessarily what you've done before, because if we're all looking about, employing people in the same molds of us, we're never going to get out of this issue. It's about looking at it totally differently. It's not about your degree or where it came from, where you worked before. It's about what you can deliver. It's about what your skill set is as an individual and how it can fit in with a company.
Absolutely. You know, the vast majority of our audience fully agree. I think, you know, it's clear that it's very much felt that there is still a significant gap when it comes to pay between men and women in the industry. We're going to start going to questions now. So for our audience, please do put your comments, thoughts in the chat. We will share those on here and just take the next 10 minutes just to discuss those. So do put those in, and they'll be sharing them with me, and so I can share with the panel. But we're going to start off with a question from Melanie Wiseman. Thank you, Melanie. She says, any top tips for effective communication if you are the only woman in the meeting room? And let's be honest, ladies, we have all been there at some point, particularly in our industry. Sorry, Jim. And it can be quite intimidating, and I think particularly when you're not used to it. So, ladies, if we could just go around each of you and perhaps just give one tip each, that would be great. So let's start with you, Eman. What tip would you have?
Can I just say a story first? And I was and Helen was there, and as well as Konstanze. Konstanze, you remember when we had a round table with former Prime Minister Theresa May?
Oh yeah.
Where all the CEOs came in, and also the political affairs directors were behind them. So we have a table of 20 people, middle-aged men, and all sitting there with their suits. And Konstanze was the only one allowed to be sitting on the same table. And we were, Helen and myself and the others, all on the back of the table, like little penguins around them. And it was hilarious. I have the picture. I wish I had it with me. I would just stream it. But that was a typical meeting, how it was male dominated. But we made the best out of it. So that was great. But I think you should really be yourself and be confident. And don't try to change or fit in. Seriously, and it's always positive when you are yourself, and that would be my recommendation.
Excellent advice. Thank you, Eman. Helen, how about you?
Absolutely agree with that. It's about being confident. I think we've all got stories. I know very early on in my career when I worked in the energy industry, I had been to meetings where a male, I wouldn't even look at me, and it's about having the confidence and continuing, you know, understanding, being confident, being firm. And we have all been at those meetings where you're at the end of the table and you've got to get your point in, because particularly these political round tables, you have to elbow your way in. And it's about being forceful. And sometimes, actually, as a female, it can work quite well, because maybe a male might not want to speak over you. So use it to your advantage, but be confident in what you want to say and be clear in getting your points across.
Thank you, Helen. And how about you, Fatima?
I agree with all of these advices. They are actually very, very useful. And and I think, as Eman said, we've been there. I think maybe one thing I would say, you know, shut that voice in your head. Don't listen to it, and just make sure that you say what you think and be yourself, like Eman said. And I think the voice in our head is more lethal than anything else. So just focus on the objective you're trying to achieve from those meetings.
That's great advice. Thank you, Fatima. I think we all recognise that evil voice in our heads sometimes, don't we? And Konstanze, how about yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with everything was said from Eman to Fatima. And I think the only thing to add is use your skills of active listening to make the point that wasn't made, or connect things up that weren't connected. I think that's always a really good contribution you can make in such a meeting. And I'm not claiming this is female, but I do think if you have the power, use it.
Fabulous, thank you. We're just going to put up the last two polling questions whilst we're going through the last couple of questions. You can also put your email address into the system, and you can get all of the results back for you if you want to. So do feel free to just take part in the last one. The last couple of questions are: have you experienced discrimination in light of your gender in a male-dominated industry? So do feel free to vote on that one. I want to just get a few more last questions in. So Karen Parry asks, do the speakers believe that it's harder for women to progress as they get older? Helen, how about you? What do you, and I'm not suggesting this because you're old in any way whatsoever, but do you think it does get harder? I mean, like with myself, having had children and moving beyond 40, do you think it gets harder as you get older?
In all honesty, I feel that it almost gets easier because I think I have more confidence in what I'm doing. I know who to speak to if I have issues. I know how to communicate with my colleagues. And I think that actually as I'm older, I have a greater level of experience. So I feel that actually being older is helping me more in what I do, I believe. I think that at the back of my mind, there is always because I have children and, I'm very fortunate, my employer gives me flexible working. I've had flexible working all the way through my career with this organisation. I think the issue that I have is in progressing further, maybe, or looking further afield, is the feeling that maybe you're not going to get what you have already from another employer. And you end up feeling quite fortunate. I know I've already said it, I'm very fortunate that I have this flexible working, but actually it should be the other way around. It should be a given that flexible working is provided. I provide a role. I don't provide kind of like, how I do that role, the hours where I do that role should not matter. It's my ability to do a role that organisations need to recognise.
Yeah, absolutely. So we've just had the results of the previous poll. So 77% of you in our audience have said that you have experienced some form of discrimination, which is, a really bad statistic, really, but sadly not unsurprising. Our last question then is, have you experienced or witnessed any of the following in female colleagues when working in a male-dominated environment? I guess so. Really, this one is more about, do you feel you have to change who you are in your personality when you're in those difficult or perhaps very male type environments? Eman, have you ever had to witness that? I find that hard to believe, but what are your thoughts on that?
So I didn't have this experience myself, but I saw one example in front of my eyes. Actually, it was a young engineer. She just had a child, and came back, and one of the colleagues, he didn't mean it obviously, but he was joking about it, and I think it wasn't really funny. He told her, and this is in German, Rabenmutter, so he told her that she is not taking care of the child, and actually her place is to be at home. And I was there as well, and then I looked at him and I said, well, you have children as well? And he said, yes. And he said, well, you are also a Rabenfather, so you are also actually not taking care of your children. And he said, no, it's a different story. I said, no, it's not. It's you as her. And she indeed left the industry afterwards, and she becomes a social worker. But that was one example I saw in my 15 years in the automotive sector, and maybe there are other examples, but I didn't see more than that.
Yeah. Thank you, Eman, for sharing that. So we've got our results in. So 44% of you say accepting masculine cultural norms and acting like one of the boys. So you've either witnessed that or you've perhaps had to experience that yourself. I'll be honest, I used to also feel like I had to almost be one of the boys in some of the work I did in my previous automotive job as well. And I think sometimes perhaps with age, or perhaps as you grow in confidence, you're much more willing, I think, to go back to the point that all of our panelists have talked about, and it's about being yourself and not being afraid to be who you are and kind of standing your ground on that. I'm conscious that we have 1 minute left until 3 p.m. and we will end on time. So I just want to quickly summarise really and say, I think all of the discussion we have has, brought out some positives and some negatives. I think we're all in agreement there's still lots to do, but I think the more we keep talking about these issues, the more we keep having these debates and kind of informing one another and supporting each other through, the more we're going to get closer to breaking down some of these barriers. I just want to say thank you to our amazing audience. Thank you for taking part. Thank you for all of your honest answers and your questions that you have given to us. We really do appreciate it. Do come back and join us on other Leaders Live events. If you are in the auto industry, we've got another great one next week. looking all about the announcement that happened yesterday in terms of decarbonisation of the transport industry. That's next Thursday at 1 p.m. So do please try and join us. Thank you so much for joining. Thank you for the amazing panel. I feel like I've had a bit of a therapy session. So thank you, everybody. And we look forward to seeing you all again very soon. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.